I really enjoyed Black Widow. It's not my favorite movie or even my favorite MCU movie, but it has extremely well written characters, an easy to follow plot, and very well done action that's concise and quick to the point. I'd say one of the things that make it stand out in comparison to other skip films is just how well its exposition is written. For example, there's a scene that's towards the start of the climax, where it has the mother and our protagonist Natasha Romanoff talking, and the mother reveals that she's betrayed them and she's still working for it because the daughter essentially, or the protagonist, Natasha, talked her out of it. And then there's this twist that happens later on, which is incredibly mind-boggling and confusing, which makes the audience want an explanation. And then it cuts back to Natasha and her mom as they're playing things out and explains the scene that you just witnessed. It explains the twist so you get a better grip on what just happened. Now, they didn't have to skip forward, make you be interested in what they said, and then bring you back to what they said. They could have just played the entire scene straight and just have them bog you down with exposition and take away a twist. But they didn't, and the movie's better for it. The movie also has very good exposition with the movie's main plot device, mind control. Because in the movie, they show how organizations are sending goons and henchmen after the mind control. They're showing you, hey, this stuff is important. So when the movie finally tells you that it's mind control, it actually feels like they worked to make you care about it. It actually feels like information that you want to hear, as opposed to bogging you down with information that you don't see as useful or entertaining. So it's a major plus for the movie. And I know I'm giving the movie a lot of credit for this, but writing good exposition is something that a lot of other movies fail at. A lot of other movies fail at it. But let's be real here. You saw the title, you saw the thumbnail, so you expect me to make a criticism of the movie. And you're right, I do have something that I want to talk about that I think that the movie could have done better. But I chose to sing the praises of the movie, so that way I'll actually acknowledge I did some stuff right, and so that this video won't just feel like I'm just making fun of the entire movie. So, the issue that I found in the movie, and there were some issues, like, they didn't keep it from being a good movie, but there were several issues. All of them played a part in keeping it from being perfection. However, I think that one particular flaw stood above the rest. And that's the flaw of the existence of mind control in the movie. You see, a lot of the movie is about essentially making up for your past mistakes and the nature of redemption. A lot of stuff that we've seen before, but it's essentially about those specific themes. I'm pretty sure it's like the main conflict. Like, sure, there's some themes about found family, but I'd say that's a sub-theme. But this is like the main conflict that is very heavily tied to the protagonist. Basically, the mind control plot, I think, really just weakens that theme because it's kind of like a get out of jail free card for the protagonist. Like, yeah, you did some messed up stuff in your past, but you were mind controlled, so you didn't really have a choice in the matter. It's okay. And if the main protagonist conflict is to make up for your past sins, then having most of the sins not being the protagonist's faults just kind of changes the story into trying to defeat whoever made the protagonist do those problems. And it makes the story way less dramatic and way less meaningful because, well, there goes all your conflict. Okay, that's an exaggeration, not all the conflict. Like, there's still conflict in the movie because even if you're mind controlling something, you just still did horrible stuff, but it's at least weakened, it's taken away. And the movie tries to fix it by essentially giving her, like, one victim that she wasn't mind controlled but still wronged. But that still isn't as powerful as having done horrible atrocities hundreds of times. Like, if you made one mistake is easier to make up for than hundreds. So, it's still pretty much an issue. But it goes beyond that because with that victim plays, okay, spoiler, but you know, that's kind of what you expect if you clicked on a video with this title. The victim is also mind controlled. She ends up controlled by the main villain. And essentially, that villain is not really much of a, well, it's not really the type of villain that would be very good to support the theme. because the villain doesn't blame Natasha. She was mind controlled throughout it. Like, they had a chance to be all, you turned me into this, you did all this, but instead, the villain says nothing, and the villain doesn't hate Natasha, so it's another situation where it's like, see, it's fine, there's nothing wrong. Basically, what I'm saying is that the movie wants to be about a character who did some evil things in the past and is trying to make up for it, but then it sanitizes those evil things to be not the character's fault, which kind of takes away some of the possible drama that the movie could have reaped and narrative elements that could have had. And Dreykov's daughter, the off-brand Taskmaster, had the potential to be the movie's saving grace, its ace in the hole. But unfortunately, they decided to not have the character have any feelings towards Natasha whatsoever, or if that character has any feelings about her, she both doesn't express it and pretty much gives up on it at the end. But that just scratches the surface of what the mind control plot device does to harm the movie. It also negatively affects the writing with certain other characters and certain groups of characters, which could have been some really cool and interesting scenes. Case in point, literally all of the Red Room agents. I like the scenes where they said to the agents, hey, you're not mind controlled anymore. You're free now. You can now live your own life. You have your own choices. But that's something that could have been done with a simple solution. You take away the mind control and essentially have them forced into the life of being a killing machine through the torture, manipulation, and iron fist of Dreykov. And I think no scene better illustrates my point than the Age of Ultron flashback scene. Now, I can already hear all of the longtime MCU fans groaning because a lot of them don't like Age of Ultron. And I get it. I mean, the marketing for the movie marketed a completely different movie, but that's literally the only issue. Because if you judge the movie on its own merits, like how you're supposed to judge movies, you actually find that it's pretty good. It's just that the marketing was really off for the movie. So with that little tidbit aside, the flashback was really incredible in Age of Ultron. I think that goes without saying, because it's stylistically pleasing, incredibly engaging, and it shows a deeper side to all of our characters. If you didn't like Natasha back in Avengers, what they do in this movie overall, and the flashback scene in particular, will probably get you invested in her character. Because in the previous movie, it pretty much told you her past. It told you about the horrible atrocity that she does and what she lived through to get it, but you don't actually see it. Here, with a flashback, you can see her picking up a gun and having to shoot someone and being forced into committing horrible atrocities, going through painful surgery, being forced and trained to be the world's deadliest murder weapon. It shows you her theme and her character, and it shows you why you should care. When Natasha is forced to shoot the person in the mask, you can feel her fear right alongside her. You can feel how she desperately doesn't want to do it, but due to the Red Room, due to Dreykov, due to her fear and her need for survival, she eventually has to shoot that person to keep going. It's such an incredibly powerful thing, and the special thing in Age of Ultron is that we see all of the other characters' insecurities, their flaws, all of their fears, but we know so little about Natasha, so when we see what makes her and what drives her, it's really special and it stands out because we already know about the others, what's revealed when it comes to Natasha. So how does this tie in with all the other Dreykov agents? Well, frankly, considering that we were able to relate to Natasha and her struggles and we didn't blame her since she didn't really have a choice in the matter, not to mention she's trying to make up for it nowadays, you could have the exact same thing and reap all the benefits of hey, you're free now thing that they did with the mind control, but still have them make their own choices and have them be more three-dimensional. You could have some characters who are complacent in all the horrible things that Dreykov is doing, but you could have other characters who aren't and genuinely fight against him because it's what they believe to be right. By simply just giving them character agency, you make it all more interesting. I'm saying that they could have done so much more, but because they limited it to mind control, they lowered its potential. Overall, this is a very good movie, but I think when it's used to try and learn writing, it could be used as a case study to show how not to use a plot device. Plot devices are not a bad thing in fiction. In fact, most of the time, they add to movies or whatever media you're creating and make them better. However, in this movie, it accomplishes the opposite of that. In movies like Joker, they handle plot devices very well. In which case, a lot of the movie would be pretty boring just to watch on its own because it doesn't really have a solid plot. But one of the things that makes up for it is its plot device of Arthur, the protagonist, having a mental condition where he laughs whenever he's I can't say it. Whenever he's uncomfortable, there we go. But basically, this little plot device takes every single scene in the movie where it could become stagnant and boring and makes it interesting. Take the scene in the subway, for example. Arthur is just sitting while a lady is harassed by two office workers. Seems like a situation where nothing will happen, right? Arthur is not exactly the heroic or brave type, so he probably won't try to help her. However, here's what he does feel: uncomfortable. And that's where the plot device kicks in. That's when he starts laughing, which attracts their attention, which immediately makes the scene interesting. This is an example of a good plot device, one that takes a fairly boring scene into an amazingly tense scene. Black Widow's plot device is not that. Black Widow takes an idea that already has a crazy amount of great potential, writing depth, and a bunch of really good things to explore, and hundreds of avenues for writing, and simplifies it into what would more likely be the plot of a Saturday morning cartoon. And I know what a lot of people are probably thinking right now. But Arts, Bucky was mind controlled. I mean, come on, Bucky has a crazy amount of emotional depth and is super interesting, but he was also mind controlled. So, by that logic, it should also be the same for Natasha, right? Don't get me wrong, Bucky Barnes has incredible depth and is incredibly well written. However, it's a different kind of mind control than the one in Black Widow. In Black Widow, there's this gas that basically mind controls you and makes you follow all orders. There's some level of consciousness when you're doing that, but it's not really delved into. And basically, it's an instant little transformation, and that happens. It's a very Saturday morning cartoon type of mind control, one that doesn't really have all that room for emotional depth. And what little emotional depth that actually does have, it doesn't have the time to really explore, or because Disney didn't allow it to be as long as the Snyder Cut. Bucky's type of mind control, on the other hand, is like mind control that's actually played for what it would really look like in a world. It mostly has to do with drugging the person, putting them through psychological trauma, and breaking their will so they eventually end up serving you. And that trauma is delved into. It's trauma that's explored in all of the movies that feature Bucky in it, and there's a lot of consequences for him, serving with a lot of bad people, even if he had no control or choice in that. He clearly had a lot of pain and went through a lot of pain from the scenes that we saw in Civil War that showed what Bucky went through and the kind of tests that he was put through, which, wow, that is really intense. When you get to the meat of it, Bucky's mind control is very realistic and it handles it very well. It's not kind of arbitrary. Black Widow's mind control, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. It's not very well written and it's not very engaging, and it takes away from the movie instead of adding to it. Like I said, it's a plot device done wrong. But I guess more than anything, this movie can serve as a lesson. When creating a plot device, make sure that the plot device enhances your story, not detracts from it. Because this story did not need any plot device to make it interesting. It would have been more interesting without it, and the plot device weakened it. So I guess what that means is that I want a Black Widow special edition or a fan-edited version of the movie that fixes that problem and makes the movie way better. Because frankly, movies are not set in stone. It just feels that way because of IP, which Unique Nameless Source made a very compelling video of why that shouldn't exist. Go check that out. And really, it's a lot better to be encouraging of writers to help them get better at what they do and encourage and give them constructive criticism so they can fix their mistakes or improve in the future, rather than be overly negative about something. Anyway, you may be thinking that with the release of this video, this means I haven't been working on the Finn one. You would be wrong! I initially planned out this video to be a palette cleanser to the Finn video. Have this just be a simple speed paint of me drawing the thumbnail while I give some voiceover and some writing advice and talk about what I think could be improved. But then I was like, let me just add some clips to make this look nice. And then I was like, let me just put little face cams and get reactions to what I say. And then I was like, maybe you can put some animations here and there. And then I was like, I can add some editing. And then, in short, I did not accomplish that goal. Unfortunately, my sons, this is the price that you must pay as a perfection. But rest assured, I was in production of the Finn video. In fact, I have several art assets I can flaunt on screen, just show that I did some pretty cool work. And for that video, I'd like your input on how the thumbnail will look. I have one version where it's just Finn's face and a little Finn Star Wars Story tagline, as you can see on screen. I've also, painted over his armor to make it look more like Empire-grade armor rather than the First Order. And then I have another version where I show some elements of the story that I'm going to include and do certain rewrites as a bit of a hint. And last, but certainly not least, I also have this third option. The option to make a thumbnail style that is, similar to this Black Widow one, where you have a character standing towards the left, and then you have, like a little background thing, and, there's an armor. Obviously, I'm just going to be showing you a sketch version, because I do not want to put so much work into, like, a great thumbnail, or a great illustration, and then have you guys just not click on it out of uninterest. And I may or may not include those, like little hints as to what's going to be in the narrative of the video, whether or not you guys are interested. So tell me which one you guys prefer in the comments, so don't screw this up.